All right, so we've had a week of this, so you kind of know how it's going to go. Start off with some questions just to get to know y'all. So, how and when did you meet the one, or how did you meet your wife? Whoever wants to jump in first.
I was working at the bank. I was about 25 years old. So if you're a 25-year-old single man working with a bunch of married women, they all think they know someone you should go out with. So I'd heard Jenny's name mentioned a couple times, but I'd never met her. She came in one day to get a debit card, and Betty Harrell came over there to where I was working and said, Jenny's over there at Miss Eugenia's desk. Why don't you just go over there and check her out, see if you like her. You don't have to talk to her because it would be awkward, but just look at her and see if there'd be someone you'd be interested in. So I start walking over there and I pass Miss Eugenia's desk, and most of y'all remember Miss Eugenia. She was the most proper woman you'd ever meet. She cleared her throat and said, "Justin, there's a nice lady over here I'd like to introduce you to." So Betty's the only one that can see my face, and I kind of mouthed to her, "I'm going to kill you." But anyway, I turned around and met Jenny, and I liked what I saw. We had a brief conversation. Eventually, I got her number from Betty's daughter and asked her out. We started dating.
I think we just need to stop there. That's probably the best story we're going to hear tonight.
Can't top that. Can't top that. Actually, I was working at Gentry, which is Ashley now. I was supervisor over a production line, and Jenny was my inspector. So she had to turn down any product that we had defects on. So we pretty much so hated each other. That's how that sort of did. But after we'd worked several years together, I'm talking about 4 or 5 years together, we got to know each other very well just by talking on the lines and stuff. And eventually I asked her out, and we dated, I don't know how many years, about a year and a half. And the best thing that I've ever come across, I'll be honest with you. We've been married 23 years now. And one thing I will say, when you do decide to marry somebody, don't think that time's just not going to fly by. Because I promise you that 23 years seems like it's been yesterday. It happens that quick. So the decision that you make, needs to be a good one.
So I was a senior in high school. She had to make sure that we could see each other. I was a senior in high school, and I had seen her at school before, just in passing, but the first time I think we actually made contact was, or actually talked to each other, was in karate class. I was actually instructing, and at the time she was chasing my best friend. But I do remember trying to work out a little harder that night, and she was only 15, so things started early. I asked her if we could go out, but her parents wouldn't let her go, and we didn't date until she was 16. So here we are, 27 years later. Well, it's not 27 years later because we were together for 6 years after that. So I got lucky. I married up. What do they say? Outkicked your coverage.
All right, so how and when did you know that your wife was going to be the one you were going to marry, and how long were you dating before you knew that?
Looking at me.
Go back in rotation here.
It happened when I left to go to banking school at LSU. I was gone from her from 2 weeks, and that was a long 2 weeks. I really, really missed her a lot. When those 2 weeks were over, on my way home, I drove home and I had a picture of her sitting right by my speedometer from like our first date. I mean, I missed her like crazy. I knew then that I didn't like being without her and that I loved her and that I thought that she could be the one. As far as knowing that she was the one, you kind of have to understand how I think. I overanalyze everything. There's a phrase, paralysis by analysis, and that fits me to a T. But I knew after those 2 weeks that she could be the girl I could potentially marry. I mean, she was pretty, smart, had a good family, a real good dad, and you know, she had a okay mom. She loved my family also. She pretty much checked all the boxes but one, and it was a big one. We had religious, you know, different religious views. She grew up in the Church of Christ, and I grew up in a Baptist church. And I knew I didn't want to go to church with someone that I couldn't carry I didn't want my kids to go to two separate churches because I didn't want them to hear conflicting messages all the time. And so we would talk religion, but we never really resolved anything. And every time I brought it up, I could tell she kind of dreaded those conversations. So I just decided to start kind of doing research on my own. So I would go to these, you know, Church of Christ websites to try to see what they believed on certain topics. I talked to Betty Harrell at the bank a lot because her husband Dan is an elder at Beach Hill, and I also knew he grew up in the Baptist church, so she was real helpful. But I knew I couldn't marry somebody that I couldn't go to church with, so I wrestled with that for a while. And once I got in my mind that I knew I could go to church with her. I didn't know if I could be converted, but I knew I could go to church with her. And once I decided that in my mind, I knew she was the one. And it was 5 months after we dated when I left for that trip. It took about another year for me to work out the religious stuff in my head. And then I waited another 6 months just so they could pay for grad school.
You know, it's amazing that he said that he was of the Baptist faith, and you know, his wife, or his future wife, ended up going to Church of Christ. It's right the opposite with me. Janie was going to Baptist church, and I was going to Church of Christ. And that was one of the things that we really talked about a lot, because one thing that I struggled with, and she'll tell you, you know, I told her we was going to go to church together, you know, and I'm just like a bunch of y'all in here, you know. I was raised Church of Christ, okay? Been there all my life. Some of the older members in here, Barry and some of them, know my dad never missed, never ever missed. Now, we might miss school once in a while. We didn't miss church. If the door was open, we was here. So when it came to some of the, I guess, discussions about how she was, you know, brought up in the Baptist church, you know, we had to get the Bible out and do a lot of studying and just come up with, you know, the truth. And we spent a lot of time doing that. And eventually, she decided she'd come to church with me after a lot of discussion. And once she decided that, I knew she was the one. I'll just be honest with you. Yep. And it's been a great decision.
This whole list of questions, you know, has had us talking some interesting conversations through this, and she doesn't know the answer to this question, but I had the answer before we've actually had this conversation, so she hasn't heard this. But picking up where we started in high school, she was 15, I was a senior, which meant I was in college and she was still a junior in high school, which I still look back and think, my father-in-law was like, what are you thinking? But it happens, you know. But I went through college for a couple of years before she was there, so she was still in high school, and but we still did, you know, we were about an hour and a half away, and we still stayed together, and really, everything went really well. I'm a stupid guy. I did a few stupid things in college, you know. You don't make really good decisions, but sometimes it takes someone from another angle to sort of wake you up. And there's a guy named Dan Jurek that was I was an equipment manager at Tennessee Tech, and the trainers were the guys that dealt with the medical stuff, so he and I were good friends, and I remember distinctly standing on the side of the track one day, and Dan started talking about Jenny, and my first reaction was, who do you think you are talking about my girlfriend like this? Because he talked about how pretty she was and how much fun she was to be around, and all of these great things, and I thought, well, you know, my first instinct was, why are you talking like this? And then it sort of hit me that he's exactly right. And that was the time. That was the time that I knew. and it took someone else just sort of saying, hey, you realize what you've got, because we've been dating for a long time. I was, I guess, a junior in
So I was already
college.
there.
Huh?
So I was already there at school with you.
She was there at Tech with me, and you know, things were going great. Once I got my head screwed on right, and you know, I finally stuck it out. So that was the time.
All right. Let's move a little bit quicker on this question, but what was it that originally attracted you to your wife?
Personality.
That's pretty cool.
I
I mean, I,
let him think about what he was going to say.
well, she was pretty. I mean, I was physically attracted to her, but the main thing, she was easy for me to talk to. And that's a big thing for me because I struggle making conversation a lot of times. And it just flowed real easy with her.
Jenny's just a lot of fun to be around.
All right, so as I said last week, now the wives are getting to talk because we're getting into opinion questions. Should we only date if we're going to marry that person? Should we only date to marry?
Me personally, I don't think so.
You don't think you should only date to marry, or you don't think you should date unless?
I don't think you should only date to marry.
Okay.
That's, like I said, a personal opinion. The reason that I believe that, you know, I think, like I said, this is just my opinion. I think you need to, you know, experience some of the other things in life. You don't never know. You know, you're going to know pretty quick if you go out with somebody and you haven't got anything in common. You're not able, as Justin said, to talk to them. You know, a lot of times you learn from failures, okay? A lot of people learn a lot of stuff from failures. And everything's not going to be perfect. And, you know, everybody don't meet their childhood sweetheart in 8th grade and end up getting married. It don't happen like that very often, okay? But, like I said, it's just an opinion.
To me, if you know right off that person doesn't have the qualities that you want to marry, then you shouldn't date them. If you already know you're not going to marry them. There's nothing wrong with going out with someone to find out if you are willing to marry them. But as soon as you know for sure that they do stuff that you don't want to marry them, then don't waste your time or their time. Just go ahead and end the relationship. At least that's my opinion.
So I'll go ahead and say I agree with these guys. And one of the things that we had experienced with us one time was we talked to a lady who had two girls, I guess. The two girls, cute little girls. She was from California, and we met her somewhere. And she made the statement that she wanted her daughters to kiss a lot of frogs. And the dad of a daughter is like, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy?" But long story short, through that conversation was, you never know when that frog might be a prince. And I'm not saying you do anything more than that. It's not anything really bad, but I think this concept we're talking about here is I agree with Justin. If you absolutely know, then just don't get involved. If those fundamentals, I guess we're going to probably talk about more here in a little bit. If those fundamentals aren't there, then you're kind of wasting your time, and you're sort of playing on the edge of getting involved when you know you shouldn't. You know, maybe you shouldn't be putting yourself in that situation. But the idea of kissing a lot of frogs just means test the waters a little bit so that you do have a good understanding of what you want and what works for you and how you. I thought they were supposed to talk too.
Yeah, the wives, if y'all have anything to throw in, y'all are welcome to.
We
I
got
was
some
just gonna
some
say,
eye stuff
kiss
going
those
on.
frogs, but not really kiss them. But you just gotta date a little bit to see what you like. Granted, I didn't date a lot. I did meet my high school sweetheart, but I still wanted, I still had a lot of friends, and I just feel like you need to have some experiences.
And that's just about 3 different perspectives than we had last week, which is kind of neat that we get to have that many. I think this is a different question from last week, but what do you think is the most important thing to remember about dating while you're in high school or junior high?
I would probably say in hindsight that the things that you're going to want when you're 30, 40, 50, it's a lot different than what you're going to want as a teenager. And I know it's difficult when you're younger, but your perspective changes over time. You know, as me and Jamie are getting older, like I said, we're in the 50s now. Friendship goes a long way in your 50s, companionship. Okay, so I think that's what you need to sort of remember as you're younger. You know, when you're a teenager, you want the nicest car, the nicest whatever, iPad, whatever you're getting. You're concerned about stuff like that. But the older you get, the less materialistic you get, and the more you want companionship.
Just for high school, I would recommend like going out on group dates and just kind of hanging out with somebody in a group setting. I mean, that's a good way to get to know someone before you have to get on that one-on-one, you know. And the main thing in high school, just take it slow. I mean, you're young, you've got your whole life ahead of you. I would just take it slow. It seems like you can make more mistakes when you're young. I mean, it takes a lot of correct decisions to end up in the correct place, but one bad decision can really derail you big time. So just take it slow.
I agree with that. That's one of the things that we've talked about a lot too, is your perspective changes as you get older, and it's hard to sit in that chair and say, you know what it's going to be like later on. It's true. But at the same time, I think if there's one thing to remember about dating, for me at least, with our kids, we have a son as well that's just a little bit younger than Megan, and the thing that we really push both of our kids in that time frame is, whatever it is, whether it's physical or sex, drugs, and rock and roll, don't put yourself in a situation that you can't get out of, and always have a way out. Always have a phone number, always have some way of contacting your parents or some friend or whatever to get out of any situation, but don't get in those situations, because you have the ability to make those decisions before you ever get there. And dating the same way. If you're asked out on a date and she tells you they want to go someplace that it's not really, that's putting yourself in that situation that you may not be able to get out of. But even if you do, always have a way to get out. Have that lifeline.
This is going to be really interesting because we have three very different perspectives coming into this. But should we ever date anyone outside the church?
Luckily for me, Jenny was willing to date someone outside the church. It was also lucky for me that it was two elders' wives that helped set us up. Jenny's mom also dated outside the church, and that turned out okay. So I don't think that dating someone outside of the church, that doesn't have to be a deal breaker. But I do think it would be a lot easier to date someone inside the church. If you are a member of the church and you plan on dating someone outside the church, to me, you need to be really strong in what you believe and why you believe it. You also need to understand going in that will eventually cause some very difficult conversations. If the dating gets serious and marriage starts being discussed, and these conversations will become very important. It worked out for others that I know and for us. However, there are couples that they didn't have good results. But you can also have two members of the church get married and not have good results. But I think ours worked out because I knew going into the marriage that I would go to church with her. I just don't think you should get married if you can't go to church together, because if you have kids, it's a very difficult situation there. But don't think that you'll get married and you'll just magically convert them. It's really hard to change. After studying the Bible on my own and going to church with Jenny and hearing the truth preached week after week, I knew my beliefs were wrong, but it was still hard for me to change. And I knew I needed to be baptized for the forgiveness of my sins, but I put it off for years because I worried about what would my family say, how would they treat me afterwards. It's really hard to change. You kind of feel like you're turning your back on your whole family. So don't just assume that person's going to change. It took me 8 years of marriage before it took 8 years before I finally got baptized and became a member here. So I guess if my kid came up to me and asked me if I would recommend, if they could date someone outside the church, I wouldn't just come out and say no, but I'd let them know of the obstacles they have to face. And I would also recommend if you can find someone inside the church, it would be a lot easier.
You know, it's going to be very difficult for me to say anything more than what Justin just said, but one, I guess, was going to be a deal breaker between me and Janie. You know, we were going, I was not going to ask her to marry me until she was a member of the church. And fortunately for me, it turned out that way, okay? Fortunately, it did turn out that way. I don't think, that you should just get up there and say, no, I'm not going to date anybody outside of the church. But on the flip side of that, as Justin said, there's many members here at the Ripley Church of Christ that's converted their spouse. Justin said it took him 8 years. Didn't take that long with me and Janie, about 2 years, okay? But I also know of a member here at the church at one time, it took almost 60 years, okay? 60 years. And some of the older members in here know who I'm talking about. It don't always work out. So I would recommend that you probably try to find somebody that's going to church with you, because that's an obstacle that if you don't deal with it before you get married, it's going to be very difficult to deal with it after you get married.
I think it is interesting. We've got probably 3 different perspectives here, because Jenny's family's background was Church of Christ, so there wasn't really a denominational question there. They weren't quite as active with the church when we first met.
They weren't.
Well, I was softening that a little
They
bit.
weren't.
They weren't active at all. But once they, and I don't, you'll have to answer this, because I don't really remember saying you have to come to church with me or this.
I think you just invited me and I came.
And that sort of flowed. So I didn't have it really difficult. I think if we had gotten to the college level and we started talking serious and she wasn't on board, then it would have been more difficult. I know our son dated a girl for a long time, and they ended up breaking up because he saw a serious religious issue down the road. And it was really hard for him at that age. But let me tell you, it's nowhere near, I'm sure, as hard as it would have been when you have a child in a crib and you're discussing how you're going to raise them. So I think that was, that was a good decision. However, you have to look at it, I see 2 Christians here that are strong that may or may not have been otherwise, So it's hard for me to say you can't. I agree with these guys. If you do, you need to be very clear on what your expectations are when you are married. If you continue to be separate, how are you going to raise the kids? And those are very, very difficult lifestyles. We've known people that have been that way, where they leave the house in the mornings, they alternate kids. It's just very difficult to have a united front as a parent when you've got conflicting views. So I think it's very difficult, but it would be very hard for me to say not to, because you may very well bring someone into Christ by doing that. So it's tough, but
All right, so
most politicians answer.
sure.
What?
I just thought it was interesting how they all brought up how it was with kids, but I think there are other important things to consider when you're married if you aren't going to church together other than having children. I think having God at the center of your marriage is obviously important, but it's a lot easier to do when you're hearing the same things and believing the same things. I'm done.
All right.
I would agree with that.
All right. I guess start off just say this is kind of the soulmate question, but do you believe there is the one for everybody, or is there just a good match that you work at to make a good relationship?
The one.
No elaboration, just
No, because
all right.
I mean, I just know many people as, I don't know which one of you said this, that has dated somebody for like, years, say 7 or 8 years, and they never get married, and then eventually you see them break up. And the reason they break up is because you got one or both trying to change one of them to meet their needs. And most people can't change. You are what you are. And if you're trying, especially for the ladies in here, if you're trying to change this guy and you think, well, I can just tweak him a little bit, yeah, you might tweak him a little bit, but you're not ever going to just really change him. It don't happen very often. And the same way, with the guys in here. You got your core principles, man. You might convert somebody and they may make a complete change. But that is the exception, not the rule. Okay? So I believe, yeah, you find the one.
All right.
Well, I agree with Ronald that you can't really change somebody, but I just don't think there's just the one out there. To me, if you believe that and you happen to miss out on that person or mess that one up, then what do you do with the rest of your life?
I don't think you intended for that to be as funny as it is.
I kind of do. I do believe there are people out there that you match up with, better with others, but it takes, and I think it's good to find those people. It's up to you to go find the ones that you match up with, and then you work at it, and then they become the one. I mean, you find people you match up with, and you work together, and then you draw closer, and they become the one. My mom told me before I married Jenny that, marriage is give and take, and it's always going to feel like you're giving more than you're taking, but just keep giving anyway. And that's a good attitude to have. And I know Jenny's probably thinking, then why don't you have that attitude? But it's a good one to have, and it's one I'm going to continue to work on.
I guess I'm closer to Justin here on the one. The one is the one that you are with, that you are building your life with. The grass is greener where you water it. And I think that needs to be your only focus when you're together. Once you make that decision, then she or he becomes the one, then that's it. There's no other question. You don't want to be going, well, I don't know if she was it. Maybe you think maybe that one was that one could have been the one, and not. No, that's not the mentality you have. The mentality is this is the one. And the thing that made me, both of us, again, we were talking about this, made me wonder about that and support that same thing is I have a cousin who's had a marriage for years. They were married for a long time. He got sick. He passed away. They were married for, 20-something years. And she found someone else, and they are super happy. And I think that situation, whether you call that the one, I think that's the one right now. I think the marriage she had before was the one. So to me, the one is the one that you make it. And that's where you're focused when you make that decision.
I didn't get all of that because I was hung up on the wise proverb there of the grass is greener where you water it. I've never heard that before. It's pretty good.
You gotta water your grass.
I've never heard that.
How have you known him?
That's like a thing.
That's one of those things Jeff West said.
Things Jeff West says.
That's true. I don't have any grass.
He doesn't always listen.
Neither on my head or in my yard.
So what I'm hearing is I say it a lot and he didn't hear it, so that means he's not listening, right?
Moving on. All right, so this is one I think is really good for them to hear as they are looking, obviously, what should they be looking for? What kind of qualities should they look for in a person?
To me, well, you have to be attracted to the person. I mean, I don't think you should keep going out with someone if there's no spark at all, because you're probably just leading that person on, and that's not fair to them. But physical appearance is not the most important thing. As you become older, it becomes less and less important, which is a good thing for me because I'm getting older looking and grayer every day.
They're great and gone.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of other things you should look for. How do they treat other people? What type of reputation do they have? Are they dependable or honest? Do you have similar interests? A good sense of humor? Are they able to laugh at themselves? But there's something else I think is important, but you don't find this out till you've been dating them for a while. I think it's really important to be able to have fun with someone without having to do anything. What I mean by that is you shouldn't have to go out all the time and do these over-the-top romantic dates just to enjoy yourself. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with doing those. But if you're having to do that while you're dating to keep the person happy, then marriage is going to be real hard. Because marriage is a lot harder.
Set that bar so high.
Marriage is harder than dating. I mean, to this day, some of the most enjoyable days I have is just staying home with Jenny and not doing anything or going anywhere. I mean, just being with that person should be enough, you know, most of the time. You shouldn't have to, you know, work at it that hard.
I mean, how can you top what he said?
Yeah, really. I think one of us maybe
I
need
mean,
to start going.
You're gonna have to
first.
start starting it, yeah.
I mean, just think
I'm
about this.
always
You
going
can't
last.
top him when he says something like that. You know, the companionship goes a long way, as he mentioned right there. You know, me and my wife, we can have a good time. As he said, you haven't got to go out to eat, or you haven't got to go out and, you know, a lot of times we have a good time just getting on a four-wheeler and riding somewhere or another, or, you know, just being together. You know, if you hadn't got that in common, it's not going to probably work out anyway. So, you know, looking for that, and then, you know, having that trust in each other, you know, confidant that, you know, you can just about tell your almost innermost feelings to, you know. I struggle with that a little bit on, you know, being able to say exactly what I want to say. But, you know, that's one thing that you're going to want in your husband and wife. You want that person that whatever you're struggling with, no matter how bad or whatever it is, that you can talk to them and that they want to support you and try to help you through it.
Dropping the mic there. I think getting past, of course, it's hard for you guys at this age to really think about long-term stuff sometimes, and especially past the physical. But I agree with these guys. You step past the physical, that's probably going to be natural. That won't be the thing that is what tripped you up. To me, it is, how does that, and I think one of you guys may have said it, how does that person treat other people, most importantly when no one else is around? Not in front of people. I don't want to see how this person acts while they're, even when they're in front of their friends, because sometimes you can be a different person in front of your friends than you are one-on-one, or even by yourself. How do they treat someone who makes no difference in their lives to them? Do they still respect them? Do they still treat people with kindness, and are they just good people? To me, that's one of those things that really can turn me off, and I'm pretty much done with you. If I see you do something that's just, you know, there's just no reason for that. There's no reason to act that way. Unfortunately, we've been involved in the last several years. Two of our good friends, and I'm saying close circle kind of friends, that have been married for multiple years, decades, and they've gone through divorces. One of those, in many of those conversations, it's just emotionally draining even for friends. But in one of those conversations, it was brought up that, well, he didn't cherish me. And the word cherish has so many connotations to it. There are so many things that go with that word. If you just focus on that, that means that you're thinking of that other person before yourself. You cherish this person because they're really important to me. If I'm looking at a potential spouse, how do they view me? Do they view me as important as themselves? Are they putting me ahead of them? Or are they doing things for me contrary to what they may like to do, or whatever, those kinds of things? That cherish word really stuck with us, and it really has a lot of connotation there. So to me, it's really one of those things where you watch how they treat yourself, of course, but really how they treat other people too. And the other thing is, how do they interact with their parents? Because more than likely, the way they interact with their parents is going to be the way they interact with their kids. because that's the way they grew up, or that's how they were allowed to talk to their parents or whatever, because that's a standard that they have already set and they've already been associated with. So how they interact with their parents, I think, is an important one as well. And this time,
I do want to point out kind of one thing that's interesting hearing all of these questions answered, or the multiple times we've heard this question answered. There's kind of a disconnect on perspectives. Because y'all are looking at it from the point of being married, and companionship is one thing that I heard a lot about. You have to be dating that person before you can know whether you have companionship with them. Where, this, if you're just looking for someone, but reputation was bought up and the way that they treat people was bought up, and those are two things that are very good to look for. Do y'all have anything when you're just looking for people to ask out, I guess? Do y'all have anything on that?
Well, the word I think he was trying to say it a while ago, people that's genuine.
Okay.
I mean, that's the word. If somebody's genuine, you know what you're getting. As he mentioned.
got that integrity.
Yeah, because if somebody, is treating somebody nice, like he said, just for show, I call that, basically just being fake. If they're doing that for show, I'm gonna struggle. I just, I'm very, my opinion is about like his. When somebody's like that around me, I just don't have a lot of respect for them at all.
Awesome, and that's a good thing to get their perspective as married guys, telling you what, once you're in the relationship, what you need to be looking for also. And this question kind of comes from last week. We had several things where they brought up being mature. That's how you know this or that or the other is being mature. So what things showed you that you are mature enough or ready to start seriously dating or seriously considering someone as someone to marry?
Showed ourselves, looking at evaluating ourselves, or evaluating our
Either
potential
or.
spouse.
Yes.
You guys have been going first.
One thing that I think, you gotta sort of, and I hate to bring this up, you gotta be sort of financially able or have a plan that you're gonna be able to support yourself in a way. Because if you're gonna start dating very seriously, okay, somebody's gonna have to, if you start making decisions like, I'm considering, do I want to marry this guy? If he's not responsible enough to at least have a job or be going to school trying to get an education so he can get a job, that might be a red flag right there. I mean, it's not a might, it is a red flag, either way. And, you got to have that plan in place. And, as Justin mentioned, if you're not wanting to date to marry right now, spend some time with your friends. You don't hurt anything to go 3 or 4 people going out and doing some stuff. But I think that's a big issue amongst a lot of families. My brother preaches in Hendersonville, Tennessee. He does a lot of counseling. He said 9 out of 10 couples that he counsels that's having issues, it's always financial, right from the get-go. He said, you can't imagine how many times people come and ask him, say, look, will you marry me? And they have no financial plan at all to even get started. He said, within 3 months, if you marry them, they're having issues. So that's one thing that I think that you got to be mature enough to at least have a plan on how you're going to support yourself.
Absolutely.
I agree with Ronald. You need to be able to support them. But one thing to me, before you start dating someone serious, you need to know who you are. You need to have your own ideas about things, develop your own faith, and not just rely on the stuff your parents tell you to believe. Don't get me wrong, you should definitely listen to your parents, but there comes a time when you have to decide for yourself what type of things you want in your life and what you're going to believe. I believe you said in a lesson one time that teenagers really need to develop their own faith and don't just take their parents' faith. until you start really knowing who you are and the things you want for yourself, I just don't know how you can know what you want in someone else. So, and until you reach that point, I just don't really think you should date anyone serious. I mean, right now you should be just figuring out who you are before you start looking for someone else. On a serious level, I'm not saying don't date, but you don't need to be serious until you're a strong person for yourself.
All right.
Man, he's tough to follow. Yeah, I mean, I think you're both dead on. It's a matter of when I start looking, or each of you start looking, am I mature enough to take this next step? You really have to realize, especially guys, you're gonna have to realize that you're gonna be the head of the household, and everything from primarily the faith, you've got to be that rock. So you got to make sure that's solid to begin with, and then have a plan. They're exactly right, because there's so much more, let's call it freedom, and so much less stress when you're not fighting over money. It's just that simple. So those types of things are really important early on.
It doesn't mean you won't do it.
Doesn't mean you won't. You know, you try to make those rules that say you're not going to fight over this, you're not going to do that. Well, that one was a tough one when trying to decide which bill to pay. And it happens. Even though you don't plan on it to happen, but you need to have a pretty good plan going into it.
All right. With time running down a little bit, let's run through this one. But what are red flags that the teen should look for in a relationship?
Well, first of all, you know, all the peer pressure that's out. Vaping, smoking, drinking, you know, it's out there everywhere. You know, even if you're raised or reared in the church, every single time the door's open, there's always temptation out there. You know, people, you know, trying to put peer pressure on you. Why don't you just try this? You know, my personal opinion is, you know, if somebody's talking to you about going out with you, this, that, and the other, if they're doing any of this stuff here, you're not going to change them, and they've already got some friends that's going to influence you very bad. And my personal opinion is, as quick as that happens, find somebody else. Because, you know, you might say, well, I'm just going to go this one time. No, you won't. That one time, you'll end up going again. And everybody that's sitting out here is no different from the ones of us sitting up here. Not in no form or fashion, just younger. And it will create, you know, things can happen that you can't get past. You know, I just think if you see something like that and you know for a fact that it's wrong, you gotta get away from it. You know, that's what Joseph had to do. He had to get away from it. And I think when you see that, if you don't get away from it, you can get reeled right in.
I think we've discussed some of the red flags, you know, how they treat their parents, the way they act around their family. You know, like he talked, if they try to pressure you into doing something that you don't want to do. I mean, everybody really knows the red flags. We just, sometimes you want to ignore them. But I think a major red flag is if, like, you're serious with someone, and then like you have family members or really, really close friends come up to you and say, are you sure you really want to be with this person? Because a lot of times, you know, you think you're so in love with them, or you think you are, that you can't see things that other people close to you can see. And I've seen it happen. I think if people are coming up to you that you really trust, asking you questions like that, you need to just take a step back, you know, look at the relationship, because those questions probably have some merit to it.
I would agree with that, and I was lucky mine was a positive influence, but you're exactly right. Those, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, but for me, going back to sort of following along with what they're saying, but I think it goes back to how do they act as a person? Are they honest? Are they moral? Are they doing things? Are they treating people the right way, the way you want to be treated, because this person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life, hopefully, if you go that far. So how they treat other people and what kind of person are they? his word. I like his word genuine. Are they genuine? Do they have character and integrity? Those are the things that are defining you when there's no one else around. What kind of person are they when they're not in front of somebody they think they might be having to impress?
All right. Just for time's sake, we're going to skip a question down. And just in general, is there anything that we have not covered that you would like to leave the kids with and end it on?
Well, I'm gonna make this statement, and some of you might not even know this, okay? I've been married to Janie for 23 years as of June the 7th this year. I was previously married before I married Janie for 10 years, okay? Went through a very terrible, terrible divorce. The thing that I do want to leave every one of you with is this. There's nothing no worse than that divorce, probably, than other losing a child, you know, in a car wreck or something like that. Make sure you get up here and, you know, I know Cody's trying his very best to work with all the youth here, and he's doing an excellent job. You don't want to make that mistake, because it's something that can tear you completely apart, and you have to live with it the rest of your life, okay? That's not God had. God didn't mean it to be that way. And I'm not going to ever say that bad things don't happen to good people, because it does. Okay? But you can eliminate a lot of that. You know, the warning signs, as Cody mentioned, there was red flags everywhere when I was 19 years old. Red flags everywhere. We didn't go to the same church. Religious beliefs was a whole lot different than mine. I wasn't near mature enough to even be thinking about getting married, much less having a child at 20 years old. Okay? Please, just to mention, take it slow. You got the rest of your life ahead of you. Okay? You know, I just want everybody to know, I don't want nobody to ever have to go through, especially when it comes to church when we up here, have to go through what I went through 30 years ago.
One thing you could look for is like, she's just we've used the word genuine a lot, but she's just a real sweet, genuine person. I mean, she makes me want to be a better person. And I hope my kids grow up and have the heart that she has. And I'm saying all that is because if you're dating someone and you don't want your kids to have the character that that person has, then you don't need to marry that person. I mean, you just really need to think about, you know, who you're dating and try to picture the future with them. Once you make the decision, I mean, it has, you know, eternal consequences.
I think what I'll get you to leave with is a little bit of, you're trying to predict the future. And we laugh about this a lot because she is definitely not the woman I married. Because she's different now than she was 27 years ago. We dated for 6 years before we got married. Neither one of us are the same person we were on one level, but we're definitely the same person on the ones that really count. You know, she may not make the bed the same way, but she's still the same person. And that's the level that you want to look at. You want to make sure you don't look at those superficial type qualities, you know, what car they drive or what kind of thing they're into or whatever. You want to look at these things that make you compatible. And you said just a minute ago, that's another really good point. How does this person make me feel about myself? Are they lifting you up or are they pulling you down? You do not want to be around people, whether it's a potential spouse or even friends, that are pulling you down. You want friends that you don't have to work at to be friends. You don't want to have to work at a dating relationship just to make it stick. If it's meant to be and you're compatible, then it's not going to be, it's going to be work, but you don't have to work at it against the grain, so to speak. So you want to look for those qualities that are going to be long term maybe not necessarily superficial type stuff.
All right. Any of the wives over here have anything y'all want to add in closing? Kind of scared to ask this way, but do you have anything you want to throw in closing? All right. Okay. Well.